Welcome to Tile on the DIY Buddy Show. Today we're going to cover a few sections. We're going to start with prep, we're going to go with underlayment, and then we're going to go with the actual install.
Yep. Yeah, we have a lot of tidbits to share with you on how to accurately capture a tile project, make it look good, make it look professional, or don't do it at all because it's really tedious and needs a lot of patience and understanding. So we'll help you through understanding what you need to.
And tile has to be college graduate level DIY stuff, right?
Yeah, I don't think it's something you should wander into if you've never touched a tool, if you have no understanding of building or design or the nuances of being detailed and patient.
I'm a DIY novice and tile terrifies me.
Rightfully so. Rightfully so. One, because we're going to get into a little more of the underlayment stuff, but the thing that I like to focus on the most with a tile job is waterproofing and making sure that it's not just about making your tiles look good on the surface, it's everything behind. Because if water gets behind your tiles, that's going to create mold, it's going to create decay, and that's going to be a job that you don't want to redo.
And we've all seen terrible tile jobs and we know how it affects the property, and then we've all torn them out at some point. If you've been in real estate for any amount of time, you know, we've seen both sides of this. We know what it looks like when it looks good, but like you said, it might not be waterproof or it might not be serving its purpose. So let's go ahead and start hitting those three sections. So first off, you have prep, because the amount of time that you spend on prep is going to just translate into the whole rest of your project. If you spend a lot of time getting it right up front, then when install comes, it's going to be so much easier. Would you say?
You couldn't be more correct. Before you're installing anything that any of your substrates, any of your backer board, make sure that you're using shims or doing whatever you need to achieve a plumb flush wall, because that makes a big difference on the final product. It's like a snowball, where if something goes wrong or something isn't tended to in the initial planning phase, it just snowballs and becomes a bigger and bigger problem. And that final product, it screams at you. It might be whispering at you in the beginning where it's like, oh, I can ignore that. It gets louder and louder. It'll scream at you on the finished product though.
What else can we look at for prep?
Yeah, so we talked about walls a little bit because that affects your final outcome of the shallow walls, for instance, or maybe even your backsplash, but thinking about floors as well. Not having level floors is really, really hard to make up on tile. A lot of people think, oh, well, if there's a dip or a divot in the floor, I just put more thin set, make it a little thicker, but ultimately that's not the right way to go. So if you're installing on floors, one good way to go about it is doing self-leveler in areas, because it's a liquid product, so it's relatively liquidous. That's a word, right? Mm-hmm. It's relatively liquidous, and you pour it down and you make sure it doesn't have, escape routes, because it'll find its own way. But that's a really good way to level a floor and prepare yourself to put whatever backer board or underlayment down so that you can install a nice flat tile floor.
All right, so we've prepped everything so that's going to be perfect and that snowball is not going to be ugly when it rolls down the hill. The next part of that is the actual backer board and the
underlayment. It's okay. Yeah. This stuff is important, but it's a thing not many people know about. And it's developed so much over the last few years.
It's hiding behind my shower. I don't see it. I don't know what it is.
No one knows about it. No one cares about it. But that's the common misconception, is that you can put tile on whatever you want. You can put tile right on the wall. You can put tile on drywall. You can put tile right on the floor. And there's so many things that have developed over the last several years to help you out and achieve a long-lasting tile install. And we talked about a little bit like, hey, make the walls right. But after you make the walls right, you got to put something, it's called a backer board. There's a lot of variety of different types of backer board. Back in the day, they used to use drywall, and that was fine. And then drywall, it's something that you don't want in a wet area for sure. You can use that on a backsplash. If you're installing a backsplash in a kitchen, probably you're going to be absolutely fine. You don't need to install like a super waterproof backer boards. But waterproofing is a massive, massive issue, especially in wet areas, that you need to tend to.
Kitchen's generally okay to just go straight on over, like this is probably over drywall here.
Yep. Yeah, over here we're on drywall, over here we're on foundation, so we've installed it directly to those substrates. We skimmed them to make them nice and level and plumb. That was the big concern, but it's not going to see water in massive quantities.
Nobody's not showering over here.
I hope not.
So, you never know. It's a rental. Who knows? But in a bathroom, obviously, you're going to want, some really solid waterproofing because, you're showering in there hopefully daily.
Yes.
So you're down to the studs. Mm-hmm. What are you putting in that shower to make sure that it's the best product or the best thing that you could do to have a forever product?
Yeah. So one of the prevailing methods that DIYers and just people that are trying to do remodels at scale and on a budget is going to be using something called Durarock or like a cement backer board. It's really heavy. It's a kind of a pain in the butt to cut. It makes a mess. And then after they put that on, a lot of people used like a latex membrane. So they paint the whole entire wall red or pink or green or whatever color the brand you're using is, but they cover that whole entire thing because in reality, that backer board isn't really waterproof. So it's not going to decay. It's concrete. So that's true. It's not going to decay, but it's definitely not keeping water out. So that's like, I would say, the least of my favorite methods. Above and beyond that, there's a lot of different products made by a lot of different companies. There's Go Board, which is a lot lighter, easier to cut, but then you have to treat the seams. Where those two things butt up, you have to put either thin set and then another waterproofing membrane, a latex waterproofing membrane. So there's a lot of nuances and details. Water will always find a way into cracks or into areas that aren't treated. Anything, where there's a void, water will find its way there. A couple of my favorites, there's one called Wedi, W-E-D-I. It's a foam backer board. With like, it's sort of super light, but it's got a coating on it. It's a proprietary coating. And then at all of the joints and the gaps, they have this goop that's it comes in a caulking tube. You just squirt it on, you spread it out, and that's it. That's it. Wow. Just in the seams where they butt up against each other or where the screw holes are. So it's very user friendly. So we mentioned backer board in showers and in wet areas. We talked about wall surfaces. What we didn't talk about is floors. So having a proper substrate and a proper underlayment in floors is equally as critical, even if it's not a wet area like showers. Like Anson mentioned earlier, do tiles have cushion? Are they really givey?
No, they're not.
Yeah, so making sure that we're prepping the flooring underneath the tile. If we're doing a large tile floor area, depending on what the floor material is, if it's concrete, if it's wood, if it's over the top of something else, please don't do that over another flooring material, but you need to know what you're installing over and what the potential problems of that flooring might be.
So if my bathroom has carpet, which everybody loves, then I could just tile right over the carpet.
No sense in having tile in a bathroom floor. Just keep the carpet.
Oh yeah,
good. And what I always like doing in flooring is using what's called an uncoupling membrane. So this uncoupling membrane, it comes in rolls. You roll it out on the floor, and it's good for a couple of things. One of those things is any movement. So wood is always going to move. Always. It shrinks, it contracts, it expands with moisture conditions. And then if it's on wood framing, there's a chance that it's going to have some bounce and some give. That is allowable to a certain degree, but like we said, that's always going to translate into your tiles and into your joints and crack things. So what a underlayment does is it's a plastic material that has a little bit of give. It's just ever so much. So it helps to defeat any deflection in your floor joists or any movement. So that's a really great thing to use over wood products, but it's also really great to use over concrete products because it's a moisture barrier as well.
Oh. So we've prepped everything really well, and then we've put down the right underlayment and the right backer board. So now it's time to install our tile, right? We just throw it at the wall, we're good to go.
More or less.
Nice. So first of all, I think safety is always something that we talk about because we're very safety conscious fellows. And so what do we need for safety?
For safety, you certainly need eye protection. Tile is one of those things where it's sharp, it shatters if you drop it. It is going to cut you. It's like a razor. So safety, and I would recommend some form of maybe gloves, light gloves, latex gloves even. Tile and thin set, when you get into thin set, that stuff is also super abrasive. Not that it's like super dangerous. It'll just make your hands really, really dry. And then eye protection is absolutely a must. If you're installing on floors for a long period of time, that's going to be a pain in your back, quite literally. So grab some knee pads, grab, maybe even something to help you, depending on what your physical capabilities or limitations are. I have a terrible back, so I just like to write a check instead of install tile on the floor.
Probably from installing tile.
Yes.
Nice.
Among other things.
Yeah. But yeah, you are using a tile saw, most likely, right? And so something like safety goggles is always good. I think you could be pretty safe.
You bring up another good point to make is you mentioned using a tile saw where, quite frankly, if you're doing a very basic, like a rectangular room and it's not super intricate, you could use what's called a tile snapper and not have to invest in a tile saw. Tile saws aren't really cheap, and the good ones certainly aren't. So you could actually get away with doing a tile snapper if you're doing straight cuts. It's actually a really good thing. The thing I would say getting into safety again is when you cut a tile tile, it does leave a sharp edge. So make sure you've got some sort of abrasive to break down that edge, or like a polishing stone is what they call it. It's almost like sandpaper for tiles, so that you get rid of those chips, get rid of that rough edge, and it makes it look a little more professional.
Awesome. Well, safety
concluded.
Safety done. All right, so we're getting ready to install. Tyler, what the heck do we need in order to install tile? Like, what are the materials that we need besides obviously the tile itself, which we'll talk about in a minute, the different types, but there's more to it than just super gluing it to the wall, right?
Yeah, so really depending on where you're going to be putting these tiles, if it's a bathroom, if it's a shower, if it's a floor, if it's a wall, there's a variety of different ways that you can stick that to the wall or to the floor. So thin set mortar is how you're going to stick these things to the wall or to the floor. There's another thing called mastic, and this mastic I would never advise that you use in a shower. It comes in a tub, it's pre-mixed. It seems like the sexiest thing, the thing you want to get because it's easy, it's mixed up, you don't have to try very hard. The trick is it's an organic material, meaning if water gets in there, mold will feed on it. That's the thing you don't want in a shower. So if water appears somewhere, you want something that it's not going to be fueled.
What else do we need? Because you have grout, that it used to come in different types, and then you need spacers. What else do we need?
So after you get ready to apply your thin set, you're going to need what's called a trowel. And again, you wouldn't be surprised to find out that these come in a number of different sizes and styles. You can get a U-shaped trowel, you can get a square-shaped trowel, you could get a V-shaped trowel. Another thing you'll need is spacers. Yeah, so we've all seen the T-shaped spacer that you just shove in there. There's another spacer that I love to use, no brand, but it's just self-leveling clips. And what that does is it actually has a part that goes under the tile, and it acts as a spacer as well. And then you put a wedge on top of two adjoining tiles. You put a wedge and then you squish them together to make sure that those tiles aren't going to be offset. So I use those on every single floor that we install.
Next, you want your tiles to look nice and sexy, like these behind us with a nice white line. Sanded, unsanded, grout. What are we doing these days?
Same thing. That used to be the determination was, hey, is it in a wet area? How big is the grout joint? This, that, and the other. And there's sanded and unsanded grouts, but now there's even more technology involved where you can get a blend of both. You can get epoxy type grouts. You can get all sorts of different grouts. I like going with something that's more universal rather than being completely unsanded or completely sanded. It's kind of a blend between the two. So that's the tools. Outside of that, we could talk about actual technique. Anson, what's your favorite way to install tile?
My favorite way is to not install tile because, like I said, it is terrifying. It is intimidating. I can understand why nobody wants to touch it in the DIY world, and I can understand why masochistic people really do want to tackle this job themselves. And I've seen really good tile work from DIYers, and I've seen not so great tile work from DIYers. So it seems fun. Is it fun?
No.
The final word that you'd use?
No. Until you get really well practiced. And that's something that I think is really important to understand is you're probably not going to be a great tile setter your very first time. If you want to get good at this, it does take practice. And the people that are doing it professionally, they didn't just start. And typically those are people that are specialists, and that's all they do. So it takes time to get good at it. But I really do think the people that have an appreciation for detail, an appreciation for perfection, those are the people that are really going to enjoy setting tile. So if that's you, give it a shot by all means. And then I think getting into some more technical application of tile things, there's a few things that I would like to mention just because as a DIYer, you might be incentivized to do it as fast as you can and not necessarily do that the right way either. So instead of just, slapping some thin set on the back of the tile, pushing it on the wall, calling it good, there are some techniques that I have found and I've been trained. Let's say, for instance, you're going to put a tile on the wall. You've got thin set on the wall first, and then you put thin set on the tile as well. So that's called back buttering. You want to put thin set on the back of the tile and then just scrape it off. You don't need to trowel it. Use the flat side of your trowel so it's just literally buttered bread. And what that does is that increases the bond. Thin set to thin set is going to bond a lot better because science, instead of just saying, hey, I've got thin set on the wall and I've got a bare tile, smashing those together, if you peel that off and look at the back of that tile, it's going to be spotty. It's not going to have full coverage. Do the same thing, and I would encourage you, if you are going to do a tile install, do this experiment. Put thin set on the wall, put thin set on your tile, smush them together, peel it off, and look at how much thin set's left on your tile. It'll be massively more thin set than if you didn't do it that way. Sure. Didn't back butter.
There is some right behind your head there, Tyler, where the tile meets other tile, Or if you're in the shower and the tile meets the wall, that's called a termination. And we've seen good ways to do this and terrible ways to do this. I think my least favorite way is just raw tile, where they either start the tile there and then the next section is cut, and so it's like raw cut.
Yeah,
doesn't look great, and then they try to maybe caulk it to match the wall color or something. Not a great look. I have seen glass tile where it was all terminated with cuts, and if you came anywhere near it, you're going to just bleed everywhere. And this was in a kitchen. So we've seen terrible ways to terminate the tile. What is your favorite way to terminate? Because obviously this is not a tile product behind it.
If we're being sarcastic, I want to share my favorite way of terminating.
Okay.
Similar story to your glass, I went into a flip. It was a recent flip. It was very much a DIY project. And the reason I knew that is because of the tile work. There was a backsplash, and where the countertop ended, but the wall continued, just like the raw edge of a glass piece. This was just a raw edge of a 12 by 24 tile. And the funny thing is they left the factory edge so you could still see the barcode on the edge of the tile. They didn't even grout the end of it. They didn't caulk the end of it. So if you run out or if you break that tile, it was probably planned so that you could get more.
Yes.
Scan the barcode and you can get more.
Absolutely.
So those finishing touches, I think, have a tremendous role in making your tile job look professional. If it's not terminated well, or if you don't do corners the right way, it stands out at you. And that's the best way to prove that you don't know what you're doing.
I mean, yeah, something like this behind it is really well done. Some tiles come with an actual termination piece, like a pencil edge or a bullnose. Yeah, all kinds of different ways to kind of make it look good at the end. Something like this is actually just a whole separate product, right?
Yeah, so this is a metal product by Schluter, which is just a fun German word to say, impossible to spell.
Yeah.
But it's a Schluter edge. This one, the profile is called Jolly. It comes in a number of different metal finishes. So from a design perspective, it's really nice because you can choose the metal finish that coordinates with the rest of your design. So as you see, we've got brushed bronze or brass handle fixtures. We've got those throughout the whole property, and then we can select a coordinating edge finish. After it's all on the wall, depending on what kind of thin set you used or how much thin set you use, sometimes if you had to go a little thicker, you want to make sure that you give it plenty of time to dry and set so that you're not putting grout into the tile joints and trapping moisture. So usually I like to wait at least overnight, unless I've used something like a quick set mortar that's gonna set up a lot faster and allow you to do a quicker turnaround. But be warned, if you do choose to use that, it goes off. It's like a time bomb. You don't have a lot of time, and that creates stress for me when I'm working with a time-sensitive product. But grout is the next step, where you're going to choose your grout based on the recommendations of your space, based on the recommendations of someone you worked with. But then this is very, very DIY friendly, applying grout, because it's a disaster. It's such a mess. And if you're cool with that, get into grouting.
Yeah. And so basically it just goes on everywhere.
Literally.
And then you wait for it to dry, and then you can come back and clean off your tiles.
It's relatively therapeutic, honestly. If you want to grout a space, you get what's called a grout float. It's kind of like a rubber handle thing where you push the grout into the space. Literally every grout joint or every tile joint needs to be filled with grout. So it's a therapeutic, repetitive process of pushing it in, grabbing more, pushing it in, grabbing more, pushing it in, and then you wipe it clean with a sponge. But the trick is it doesn't wipe clean with one wipe. You've got to wipe it like 48 times, and then you have to wring out the sponge, get clean water. So it's a process, but really it's very difficult to mess it up. Don't stress if it's not coming clean. Just keep wiping.
So maybe you could just be a DIY grout.
Yeah,
and not
totally.
Not a tiler.
Totally. I think there's a lot of it's just very cathartic getting in and doing grout. So, but that is the part that actually makes it look really good too, because tiles by themselves without grout just kind of looks boring until the very end. That's when you can step back, crack your beer or your LaCroix, and just marvel at how good it looks or bad it looks, depending on how far you kick down that snowball.
Yeah. Little spacing issue. You never know what you'll find.
It will either highlight the shortcomings, or it will highlight how many details you paid attention to.
And white grout on a dark tile, is a bold choice.
Bold move.
And you better have done your spacing jobs and your leveling jobs.
Exactly.
Your back better.
That's a really good point to make to DIYers. If you're not sure of the detail work that you've done, don't choose a contrast grout color that's going to contrast with your tiles. Choose something that's going to blend in, because that will hide some of the sins. That's a really good point.
I would just do white on white if it was me, or black on black.
Yeah.
And then nobody would see anything wrong.
And honestly, that's very on trend, by the way. I mean, from a design perspective, doing something where it is tone on tone rather than contrasting colors. So you could get away with quite a bit by choosing your design elements specifically.
And if you've done everything that we've told you in this entire video, it'll look just like this.
No promises.
Yeah.
If you've done everything we've told you and it doesn't go right, don't comment below, please.
But do please leave us a comment below. Tell us if we missed anything.
Tell us about your worst tile job. Yeah. Tell us the worst one you've seen.
Or your best one.
Or your best. Let's be optimists.
Yeah, so